Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey everybody. Today I wanted to do an episode about making decisions. I am recording this podcast on a Thursday night in my new house, or my old new house. I think I mentioned before that we spent the last year renovating our house. I am at my kitchen table in my beautiful kitchen. My kids are on the way to falling asleep, but I wanted to record this tomorrow, but the electrician is going to be here all day, sort of in and out. And I was like, let's just get it done. My husband's out tonight with a friend and the kids are usually pretty quiet, but we'll see if somebody starts screaming at me for a red blanket. But tonight, in this little pocket of time, I wanted to talk to you about, like I said, making decisions. And the decision making that I wanted to talk to you about today is about the pulling the trigger part of decision making. The part where you basically know what you want, but sometimes you might hesitate or swirl or want to analyze it even more or feel anxious and indecisive and put off actually kind of pulling the trigger on making a decision. There's, of course, another part of decision-making. There's that more early part of decision-making where you really have no idea what you want. I'd call that more like compass work. And if you are lost in that kind of forest of having no clue at all what you want, I will direct you back to, I think, episode 17 of my podcast, which is called Compass Instruction Manual. I think that will be really useful to you. This episode, like I said, is for when you basically do know. You basically do know that you need to leave the job, for example, but there are also these big fears or hesitations that are holding you back. I will say I come to this episode as someone who has struggled to make decisions. I have been an agonizer for much of my life. I am someone who loves to analyze and then analyze some more, who has really hesitated to make big decisions. So in today's episode, I want to share 5 practices or thoughts that have been really helpful to me and my clients in the hopes that they might be helpful to you too. The first one is figure out when you are the most trustworthy. I'll say that one again. Figure out when you are the most trustworthy. For me, the times when I am the most trustworthy, the times when the decisions that I make and the knowing that I have is the most worthy of my own trust, that's when I'm quiet and alone. And the morning is best for me, when my nervous system is calm. I hear my personal truth best when I am quiet and alone, ideally in the morning, usually journaling, sometimes walking. So if I'm making a big decision, I will do my best to make and then finalize that decision when I'm in that trustworthy place. And also, ideally, I will try to only address concerns when I'm in that most trustworthy place. Because if I'm quiet, alone, journaling in the morning, I can sift through a concern that my brain might offer me and decide, okay, yeah, this is a potential issue, but I'm okay with this trade-off. Or maybe on the flip side, no, I really need to take that into account. Maybe I need to shift my trajectory. But if a concern comes up at some other time of day, maybe in the middle of the day, and let's be real, concerns will come up because many big adult decisions are not hell yeses. They're very complex decisions involving significant trade-offs. So we will be taking on a cost even as we are hopefully getting a benefit. So when that happens, I will try to, if it comes up in the middle of the day, remind myself that just because I have a concern, just because that concern exists in my brain, this is not when I'm going to decide whether it's valid or not. Not every moment is a decision-making moment. And then I will try my best to only really make that decision or filter through those concerns when I'm in my most trustworthy place. I've shared this concept with several clients recently who are in the process of making big decisions. And it's interesting how people can have trustworthy moments or times of day or experiences that are just really variable. Like I said, mine is when I'm alone, ideally in the morning. One of my other clients feels at her most trustworthy when she's talking live to someone she trusts, like her roommates or me. But she's also learned that even though she likes talking out loud to these people, she has to be live. So recording, for example, a voice note to a friend, it doesn't really do it for her. It doesn't scratch that itch. That's really important to know. So you might look within yourself, dear listener, and say, am I most trustworthy? Do I trust myself the most, the decisions I make the most when I'm alone or with others? Do I trust myself the most late at night or in the morning or when I'm having lunch? Do I trust the decisions I make the most when I'm at my house or in the mountains or in a cafe, in the shower or journaling? But do put some thought into it. When do you trust the decisions you make the most? When are you the most trustworthy? And try, whenever possible, to make decisions when you are the most trustworthy, to address concerns when you're the most trustworthy, and then to trust decisions made from that trustworthy place. So that's the first point I wanted to share. The second idea I wanted to offer you is your decisions will not always turn out the way you intended. This does not mean you made the wrong decision. I'll say that again. Your decisions will not always turn out the way you intended. This does not mean that you made the wrong decision. I emphasize this point because I think our brains, at least my brain, sometimes hesitate to make decisions because we don't want to make a mistake. We're afraid that maybe we'll end the job and we'll think, oh my gosh, actually the job wasn't the real problem, it was something else. Or we'll make the big investment and we'll realize, oh my gosh, I really wouldn't have done that knowing what I know now. But the thought error that our brains make in a moment like that, or at least my brain makes and many of my clients' brains seem to make, is that we believe on some level that if we just analyzed it enough, we could prevent these quote unquote mistakes, these situations where a decision turns out not like we intend. But that's actually a thinking error, because the reality is that we will never, ever, 100% be able to predict how a decision will go. No matter how much we analyze or agonize or data gather, some percentage of the time, we will make the best possible decision that we could at the time, and still it will turn out in a way that we did not intend. So if you find that you kind of quote unquote, like I said, made a mistake and you had a decision turn out the way you didn't intend, it's important to remind your brain that it's not necessarily that you made the truly wrong decision. It's just that that is what happens some percentage of the time, no matter what, for all people in all circumstances. For me, for my brain, I find it pretty helpful to put a percentage on it. My brain responds well to numbers, to having things that feel a little more concrete. So I will literally say to my brain, okay, 5% of the time, even if I do a complete decision-making process, my decision will not turn out the way I intended. And that's not a mistake. That's just how decision-making results work. And I know it's easier and less stressful to entertain this possibility that some percentage of decisions will just not turn out the way you intend, no matter what, in all circumstances. It's easier to entertain this idea about smaller decisions, like, should I buy this sweater? Versus bigger decisions like, should I buy this house? Or should I undergo this surgery? But I find that for all situations, just entertaining that possibility allows there to be more compassion and more comfort in just making a decision. Yes, even if it's high stakes. Because even with high stakes, there is no way for me to 100% of the time completely avoid those mistakes. Yes, even if I analyze and agonize till the cows come home. And if you are listening to this and you are thinking, okay, fine, I know I'll make mistakes no matter what, I would just like to decrease the likelihood of mistakes. Welcome. You have a brain just like mine. And that leads me to the next point that I wanted to share. My third invitation is be the kind of person who is willing to fix it when a decision doesn't go how you intend. Be the kind of person who's willing to fix it when a decision doesn't go how you intend. If it's true that, just as we discussed, if you make decisions, some percentage of the time you will find that you are in a situation that you did not intend. We can regret, blame ourselves, wish we'd done something differently in that situation. Or we can become the kind of people who are comfortable with the idea that some percentage of the time we're just going to have to fix it when the decision doesn't go how we want. We'll have to repaint the room when the color turned out differently than we intended. Or on a bigger scale, if we say drop out of law school to become an actor, it's possible that the law school won't let us back in when we realize that was a mistake, if we realize that was a mistake. But if we really, really want to be a lawyer, we will find a way to fix it. There will be a way to figure it out on a medium to longer term time horizon. On one hand, I think most of us probably know this on a bigger term scale. Realistically, most of us know that most decisions are reversible. Yes, there might be a bit of stress in the short to medium term, but typically most decisions can be reversed. It's rarely actually a crisis. So I share this both to remind us of this fact, but also to invite us to not just know it, but become the kind of person who just is comfortable fixing decisions that don't turn out as we intend. We can become someone who's like, yeah, okay, this is one of those times that didn't turn out like I intend. That was always going to happen some percentage of the time. So now I'm going to fix it like I do. If we can become that kind of person, then pulling the trigger becomes a lot less scary because we are willing to fix the fallout when it happens, which it will. And there's another upside to actually deciding, to actually pulling the trigger, which is the next thing I wanted to share. So the fourth thing I want to offer is the best way to get better at making decisions is by making decisions. We are more likely to make decisions that do turn out the way we want more of the time by deciding more often and then experiencing the consequences. We learn the types of mistakes our brains tend to make in how we gather information or how we weight the relative importance of information when we actually see the after of the decision. I think our fearful brains think that more analysis helps to make decisions. And yes, up to a certain point, as I mentioned, I think analysis does help. But past that, it's kind of declining marginal returns. And past that, the best way to actually get better at making decisions is to make a decision and experience the consequences. And I know that can be really hard to hear when you're agonizing over something important. But also, I have found that for me and for many of my clients, it's also really helpful to think, at a certain point, the only way that I will fully reap the rest of the learning opportunities from this is just to actually pull the trigger, actually make the decision. That is what will unlock the learning. Thinking that can sometimes make it feel good to step through the door of decision-making, of pulling the trigger, because you're moving towards something good, which is improving your decision-making skillfulness. And the fifth and final thing I wanted to offer was decide where you want to err. So as we discussed, this fundamental thought error when making decisions is this belief that it even could be possible to get it right all of the time, to get that probability of decisions going not as we intend as close to zero as possible. But if we accept that maybe we'll never totally get decision-making, quote unquote, errors below, say, 5% or 3%, then we might be able to decide, okay, so if I'm going to err, where do I want to err? This is a silly decision, this personal story that I'm about to share, but it was a decision that I thought a lot about. We, as I've mentioned in the motherhood podcast, I think we hired a night nanny when my kids were born. And before we did that, I really agonized over that decision because it seemed really expensive. And we also wondered, is this overkill? Are we going to be okay? And ultimately, and I will say I was the one who ended up kind of pushing for this, even though my husband was later absolutely obsessed with our beloved night nanny. Ultimately, I decided that I wanted to err on the side of spending too much money and getting too much support if we did err. And If we look back and we realize we had made a mistake, I would rather the mistake be, wow, we really overspent on that one. We didn't necessarily need that. Rather than, wow, we're totally overloaded and we need more support and we are dead. And look, overspending or getting too much support isn't necessarily always where all of us will want to err. But for us, in that season of life, it was the mistake, quote unquote, that I wanted to choose. It didn't even end up being a mistake, but I was agonizing about it. And I just decided, if it's a mistake, I want to choose to make that mistake versus the mistake of not spending enough and not getting enough support. I had a client recently who was going to move in with two friends of hers. She had been living alone. She was going to move in with these friends as roommates, and she had a lot of nervousness about it. Would the relationship still be as good when they lived together? And she decided that she wanted to err on the side of potentially overtaxing their relationships or, overstressing them instead of never testing them. So that's where she wanted to err if she erred. It didn't end up being a mistake. She ended up having an absolutely amazing time, but she decided in advance where she wanted the mistake to be if there was a mistake. I had another client who wanted to leave her job, and for many years, she'd been erring on the side of safety and security, of not leaving her job. But over the course of our work together, she decided she wanted to err on a different side now. She wanted to err on the side of potentially being too risky in leaving her job. It has turned out to be the right decision. She's very glad she did it, as was my previous client with the roommates. But sometimes just saying to our brains, I can't choose to never make mistakes, but I can often choose where the mistake will likely be if it is a mistake. Sometimes that can give us a confidence and a sense of empowerment and get us over the hump to finally pull that trigger. So that's my fifth idea. Choose where you want to err. So those are my 5 ideas on how to actually decide to pull that trigger and perhaps, hopefully, to not obsess too much after the trigger has been pulled. So to say them again, because I think our brains really benefit from summaries, those ideas were: 1, figure out when you are the most trustworthy and trust decisions that you make then. 2, accept that your decisions will have results that you do not intend some percentage of the time. 3, become the kind of person who's okay with fixing errors when they happen. 4, get better at making decisions by actually making decisions. And 5, decide how you want to err. I will also say, with the biggest decisions in our lives, they may still be hard. Deciding whether or not to get that surgery, whether or not to end that marriage, whether or not to invest your life savings in that new venture, those are big, complex, often mixed bag decisions. But I hope this episode gives you at least a few more tools to engage with them and feel calmer and more confident and clearer in making them. Thanks, everybody. I'm rooting for you. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.